Today we are in Grand Island at the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture Program. You're listening to the Rural Radio Network, and I'm Jesse Harding. Joining us today is Andy Bishop, and he is the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture Coordinator for today. So when we kick things off today, we're going to take a few steps back, and we're going to start with what is the Rainwater Basin, and what are some of those projects that you do?
The Rainwater Basin is actually a landscape from roughly Seward County all the way to Gosper County, north of the Republican River and south of the Platte River. And the conservation projects that we're involved in is primarily restoring playa wetlands. Sometimes they're referred to as buffalo wallers or lagoons, but they are tremendously important to migratory waterfowl. Historically, there were about 11,000 wetlands in the Rainwater Basin. Today we have about 2,000 that still show some level of function. We've gone from about 200,000 acres of hydric soil wetland type footprints out there to about 40,000 acres. So there's numerous opportunities to restore, enhance the wetland features that remain in this landscape.
And in those areas, it's a lot of cropland and a lot of producers. How do you work with them to help fix things and bring things back to maybe a happy medium between both groups?
The Rainwater Basin is approximately 99% privately owned, so finding that win-win opportunity is really critically important if we're going to get wetlands back on the landscape. The joint venture recently has embraced 3 different initiatives. One of those is the Watershed Initiative, followed by the Management Initiative, as well as working with USDA to do a pivot crossing initiative. The Watershed Initiative looks at trying to fill in abandoned irrigation reuse pits. Approximately 72% of our wetlands are intersected by pivot irrigation systems. So to try to restore the natural hydrology within the watershed, each wetland has an individual watershed that funnels water to the wetland. We did an inventory of the number of irrigation reuse pits. There were 56,000 irrigation reuse pits excavated in the Rainwater Basin. All of those occur in watersheds of different wetlands, and those irrigation reuse pits have to fill before the water can reach the wetland. So we've been strategically evaluating which wetland features still exist, which irrigation reuse pits are in the watersheds, and what's their proximity. By filling those irrigation reuse pits, we restore the wetland hydrology and bring the water back into the wetland. So to date, we filled over 200 abandoned irrigation reuse pits. This is a win-win for the producers. Most of them have transitioned to pivot irrigation systems, so they no longer use the irrigation reuse pit at the lowest point in their fields. So we remove an impediment for them to farm around, restore the hydrology to the wetland, and increase the ponded acres of habitat during spring migration. The Management Initiative is trying to integrate wetlands back into producer operations, either for grazing or haying. Historically, these wetlands evolved and the plant communities evolved with grazing by either buffalo or elk. Well, today we have cattle and cattle production in the Rainwater Basin. Oftentimes, producers have to ship their animals outside of the Rainwater Basin and then bring them back in the winter to graze stocks. We're trying to restore the wetlands and make sure we have the grazing infrastructure, perimeter fence, cross fence, livestock well, so that the producers can easily integrate these wetlands back into their operations. We provide up to 85% cost share for any livestock production. The last initiative that we have is working with the Natural Resource Conservation Service as part of their agricultural easement program, working to get pivot crossing as part of the reserved right that remains with the landowner. So it's not tied to the easement, it remains with the landowner. We also pay for up to 85% for pivot modifications, whether that be transitioning wheels, changing wheels out, putting track systems on, moving pivots, etc., so that the landowner can maximize the irrigation to the uplands and either minimize the amount of travel through the wetland, or to have the best types of modifications to the pivot so there's the least amount of impact to the wetland as the pivot goes through the wetland.
Now we're here today and it's your 20th informational seminar. What was the purpose of kind of starting this, the goal of having everyone out here today?
Well, the Rainwater Basin is 99% privately owned, and it's all about perspectives and understanding each other's needs, goals, objectives. So it started as very much so an agency-centric type of seminar, but we've tried to really expand this and make it, one where it's landowners, agency folks all meeting together, working together, to come to the table, to the seminar, to listen to the new science, the new programs that are available, but also have those discussions. The discussions that happen over lunch, the discussions at the breaks, are when we as agency and the conservation community learn what's good about our programs, what's bad about our programs, what we can improve on. For example, the Pivot Crossing initiative came out of conversations with landowners at the informational seminar. The other thing that the info seminar does is it allows everyone to have those open, frank conversations, about not just the programs, but also future goals and objectives, as well as meet the people that are doing the programs. It's all about personal relationships when it comes to doing a habitat project. So knowing that face, knowing that person, really starts to set the stage for those types of programs to be delivered on the ground.
Now, what are some of those topics that are being talked about today and some of those areas where both the producers are getting the information as well as some of those other organizations are working?
So today we have some really neat topics as far as variable rate irrigation. Now, you might not think that would be a topic at a conservation seminar or symposium, but we look at the opportunities to work with industry and find those public-private partnerships. So we have representatives from Lindsay Corporation, makers of Zomatic pivots, that'll be talking about their pivot modifications they offer to get the pivots through wetlands, but also variable rate irrigation technology and how that can be applied to actually turn the water off as the pivot goes over the wetland and maximize irrigation inputs on the adjacent upland cropland. It's one of those win-win opportunities. The other thing we have is Crop Metrics is a presenter today that's going to talk about how agronomists look at wetlands as they work with producers to develop plans to maximize net farm income and look at the different types of programs or options that the producer has if they have a wetland within a tract. We also have the traditional types of talks about the different programs. With the new Farm Bill that was passed last year, we're having a Natural Resource Conservation Service provide overviews of the different programs that are available, the new changes that have happened. We also have a Risk Management Agency and Farm Service Agency that'll be giving a presentation on crop insurance and some of the implications that'll have with compliance, conservation compliance, and cropland insurance policies. So just a variety of topics that you might think of it as just a conservation symposium, but it's much, much broader than that.
We are at the Rainwater Basin Joint Venture Information Symposium. It is their 20th annual one, and you're listening to the Rural Radio Network, and I'm Jessie Harding.